We are officially in peak rookie hype season. There's rookie drafts going on for me right now. I'm in a couple of them. And right now is the best time to buy and sell current veterans because the market is so reactive to what happened in the NFL draft. So today, we're going to be featuring our brand new updated Dynasty trade value chart with rookie pick values for 2024 and 2025, 2026 future rookie pick players. So you guys can get an idea of when we say sell this player, what you should be selling them for, buy this player, what you should be buying them for. I believe it is one of the best resources that we offer. And of course, you can get access to it on flockfantasy.com using the promo code FSE, which will be linked down below in the description. But without further ado, let's get right into it. Alrighty, so we're going to be going through my Dynasty trade targets, buys and sells by position. I got about 6 or 7 names at wide receiver and running back that I'm buying and selling each. And then at quarterback and tight end, just a couple of names here and there. So let's start at the wide receiver position, one of the glamour positions in fantasy football. On our trade value charts, we basically look at keep trade cut value and relative to our own rankings, determine if a player is a hard buy, meaning that we're way higher on them than the market seems to be, a soft buy, meaning we're a little bit higher on them, a hold, meaning we're about in line with market, soft sell a little bit lower, and then hard sell way lower on them than the keep trade cut market value. So a couple guys fit into the hard buy category, which was Calvin Ridley and Josh Downs. With Calvin Ridley, I'm in so many leagues where wide receivers go for an arm and a leg. If you want a productive wide receiver that has wide receiver 2 finish projection, maybe wide receiver 1 upside in points per game, Calvin Ridley is the type of guy that can get there who's not being valued that way. Big play-wise, touchdown luck-wise, a lot went wrong in Jacksonville for him. Trevor Lawrence was banged up. Calvin Ridley hadn't played in a couple of years. There was a whole lot going on there, but Calvin Ridley still signs a mega contract, tethering himself to an exciting young quarterback gunslinger mentality like Will Levis. The Titans passed on wide receiver in the NFL draft. They could have drafted Rome Odunze at 7th overall. All NFL draft long, they really didn't address the position until later on. They wanted to beef up their offensive line. They wanted to make this offense better for Will Levis. It seems to me that they're very comfortable with Calvin Ridley as their number 1 wide receiver. And DeAndre Hopkins still being there draws some attention as well. Maybe Treylon Burks working out of the slot can get something done. If you're a contender and you're in a league that's full PPR and you can start up to 4 or 5 wide receivers on any given week, you can get this guy as your 4th or 5th wide receiver for your contending rosters to fill out one of your flex spots all season long for early to mid 2nd round capital right now. I like Keon Coleman and Xavier Legette and Jalen Polk and Ricky Pearsall, some of the guys that are going to go in that range at wide receiver, but they could easily bust out in my opinion. And who knows, with rookie fever, maybe you're getting Calvin Ridley for even cheaper than that, because right now that's kind of how I value him, as an early to mid 2nd rounder, but you might be able to get him for like the 207 or the 208 because some people really want access to this rookie class, and I don't blame them. It's a really good class, but Calvin Ridley is the type of guy that I'm very excited about buying if I'm a contending team looking for some wide receiver production. So the next guy that we're going to talk about is not a contending buy, more so a rebuilding buy. Josh Downs, wide receiver of the Indianapolis Colts. I said it when it happened, but Josh Downs isn't dead in my opinion. Adonai Mitchell comes into Indianapolis with the 52nd overall pick, and I believe he's opened a nice buying window for Josh Downs, the talented slot receiver who just had a 770-yard, 2-touchdown, 98-target rookie season at 21 years old. Very solid numbers for a young player, despite his starting quarterback getting injured for most of the season, and he was competing for targets with Michael Pittman Jr., who was obviously a top 15 receiver in fantasy last year, and Alec Pierce, who, even though he isn't very good, was a higher draft pick by this team than Josh Downs was. So he came in right away and he produced. Adonai Mitchell, in my opinion, he's a project wide receiver. He's going to replace Alec Pierce on the outside, most likely. I don't think he'll make a big impact in year 1. And he could even end up outright face planting and not getting on the field too much right away, because I do think he's a raw prospect. Anthony Richardson is a big, hulking, quarterback who's 6'4", has a little bit of accuracy issues here and there. I think he is going to love Josh Downs, his constant separation ability over the middle of the field. It makes for easy reads for Anthony Richardson. He fed Josh Downs over 6 targets per game in the full games that he played before tearing his shoulder, his rotator cuff. that he started and finished last year. So for me, with Josh Downs, this is a guy that's available like as a wide receiver 55 in Dynasty. Like, he is not valuable on the market right now, and I do think he's a great buy for rebuilders, especially if you can just fire away a late second round, early third round rookie pick for him, because I believe you will be able to with how much hype this class has behind it. So if you can fire the 211 to the Josh Downs manager and get him in return for a package like that, I do believe he's a very good rebuilding buy and stash for the future. Some of the other Dynasty wide receivers that I'm buying, these are more so soft buys rather than hard buys. Brandon Ayuk and T. Higgins both kind of fit into the same category, so I'm grouping them together. The reason that they're mispriced, in my opinion, is because there's uncertainty risk with their long-term situation. With both of these guys, they're awaiting contract extensions from their current teams. Neither guy was traded during the NFL draft, even though there was rumors that Ayuk might be on the move. There was rumors that T. Higgins might be on the move. In my opinion, I think both of them will re-sign with their current teams. And if that happens, if one or both of these guys re-sign, they're going to solidify themselves as Ayuk being a back-end wide receiver 1, T. Higgins being a mid-wide receiver 2. Ayuk being valued outside of the Dynasty wide receiver 1 range, in my opinion, is going to correct itself the second he re-signs, because, in my opinion, Deebo Samuel is the more likely wide receiver to be jettisoned next offseason. I do think they will prioritize Ayuk. I think Ricky Pearsall can play a gadgety role, but he can't play X wide receiver like Ayuk can. So I think if they're going to view one of these guys as expendable, it's going to be the guy who's older in Deebo Samuel, the guy who's already making a lot of money, and the guy who's dealt with more injuries in Deebo Samuel. So Ayuk, to me, type of guy that I'm absolutely buying if you're a contender and you want a solidified stud number 2 or even number 1 wide receiver for your team. I think Ayuk has a small buying opportunity right now. And same goes for T. Higgins. I mean, Jermaine Burton in round 3 was a great outcome for T. Higgins, because they very easily could have selected Brian Thomas Jr. at 18th overall. They could have selected Xavier Worthy or one of the other top wide receivers. My guess with T. Higgins is that he signs a Devontae Smith-like extension before the season begins. I think that they're just being stupid and not re-signing him. To be honest, it's not ideal that either of these teams have waited on extending their wide receivers. Smart franchises like the Eagles got ahead of Devontae Smith's extension because they know this position is only going up and up and up in terms of market value. But T. Higgins has been such a victim of injury. People forget that he's a top 15 to 20 talent at the wide receiver position when he's healthy. And if he's back in Cincinnati, he's shooting all the way up to the same range as Devontae Smith, to the same range as Jalen Waddle. He's literally younger than both of those players, despite being drafted a year earlier. So the guy's literally barely 25 years old. He is going, if he gets an extension and he's tethered to Joe Burrow long term, he is definitely still a top 15 to 17 Dynasty wide receiver, and he's being priced at the back end of wide receiver 2, even high-end wide receiver 3 range right now. So he is one of the guys that I'm actively buying. Nico Collins, Devontae Adams, and Christian Kirk all have kind of different cases here, but the general sentiment that I have around these guys is that they're all mispriced on the market right now. Nico Collins was on his way to elite wide receiver territory, tethered to the best young quarterback in the NFL with CJ Stroud. Reception perception from Matt Harmon has detailed that Stephon Diggs is not quite the player that he used to be. He comes into the Houston Texans, and it's got this buying opportunity on Nico Collins, even though he's only a one-year rental and he's a little bit older and he might be over the hill as it pertains to his production right now. Nico Collins could absolutely do exactly what he did last year, which was absolutely ball with CJ Stroud, big plays, downfield touchdowns, all that good stuff, especially with how defenses can't hone in on him because Diggs is there, because Tank Dell is there, and because they should have a better running game with Mixon this year. Adams also is, I think, one of these guys that is still one of the best receivers in the league. Devontae Adams, you can't convince me that he's still not a top 10 receiver talent in the league, and I don't really care who's throwing him the ball. Gardner Minshew was able to support Michael Pittman Jr. last year. Aiden O'Connell was just fine in the games that Devontae Adams was in there with him. I think that he's an absolute lock for 150 to 180 targets this year, and he will be one of the best values in redraft, in my opinion, a guy that you can get as mid wide receiver 1 production, low-end wide receiver 1 production for way later than he should be going. If you're building out a contending build in a Dynasty startup, you can get this guy as like your 7th or 8th player on your roster, and he could be one of your most productive assets next year. Sending a 1-2 turn pick for him in a trade for that kind of production, it makes it an easy decision in my opinion. So Devontae Adams, if you need a contending wide receiver buy, in my opinion, he is the best guy to go after, because mid to low-end wide receiver 1 production does not come this cheap more often than not. Christian Kirk is kind of a cheaper version of Devontae Adams, where, similar to Calvin Ridley, a mid-second or even a late second may be all it takes with rookie fever in full effect to get Christian Kirk, who I believe has wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 floor upside written all over him. I believe that Brian Thomas Jr. was a raw prospect. He could start slow in the NFL. Gabriel Davis is not a target earner. Evan Ingram is good, but he is a tight end. I think Christian Kirk is the go-to guy in this Jaguars offense at still just 27 years old. PPR wide receiver 2 projections aren't usually available and given out freely like this for mid to late second rounders, especially if you guys play in leagues, like I said, where you could start 3 wide receivers and 2 flexes and it's a full PPR league. He's definitely less interesting in shallow leagues where you need like a loaded starting lineup. But if you're in a deeper league, Christian Kirk is absolutely worth a mid-second round pick, in my opinion, because I do believe you're going to get very solid value for him. If anybody wants a first for him, you're definitely not giving that up. But like the 204 to 208, if you can give that up for Christian Kirk, I feel very, very good in his type of projection there. So DK Metcalf is one of the sells that I have at the wide receiver position. If you look at DK Metcalf's production, I think he's been one of the more overrated receivers in fantasy the last couple years. I think he's a good real life receiver, but he's been a low-end wide receiver 2 in 3 straight seasons since his breakout second year. To my point on Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley, I feel like I'm getting similar production out of those guys as I'm getting out of DK Metcalf. And with Devontae Adams, I'm getting even better production out of him. I would love to sell DK Metcalf off of like name value and upside, and everybody like loves DK Metcalf because he's big and he's fast and all that kind of stuff. You could still get a mid to late first for this guy, and whether that's swinging on his teammate Jackson Smith-Njigba, you could sell him straight for him right now, who may impact his production year one. I think both of these guys have a chance to be the number one of this offense long term. Or you could swing for a guy who's just more of a solidified number one with more upside, like a George Pickens, for example, or like I said, go for a straight up competitive asset. He's already a competitive asset at 26 and a half years old. So why not go all in and go after Adams or Mike Evans, who can give you wide receiver 1 production instead of wide receiver 2 production? So DK Metcalf, one of the guys that I'm hard selling in Dynasty right now. Jaden Reed, again, I feel bad saying this because I really love Jaden Reed and I loved him coming in to the draft cycle last year. I've discussed it with him a lot. So with Jaden Reed, there's 3 other wide receivers in his core that can play at a pretty high level: Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Dontavian Wicks. And it feels to me like we're overpricing Jaden Reed and underpricing the other guys when I think they should all be kind of close-knit, close together. Jaden Reed definitely should be the highest of that group, but I think if you have Jaden Reed, wide receiver 31 on Keep Trade Cut like he is right now, and the other guys in the 50s, it just seems way too far apart. I think that Christian Watson and Jaden Reed should be within 5 to 10 spots of each other, and then Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Doubs within about 20 spots of the first guy, Jaden Reed. So with all of these guys, I mean, to me, it just seemed like Jaden Reed sun-ran the season where Christian Watson was out for most of the year. Romeo Doubs and Dontavian Wicks were still young players coming on. Wicks especially as a guy that was like a late-round pick who worked his way into the lineup late in the season. Tucker Kraft started to factor in. They had no run game last year. Aaron Jones was hurt most of the year. A.J. Dillon was awful. That should be fixed now with Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd coming in. It just feels like Jaden Reed's season played out perfectly for him, and that's great. He took advantage. He took full advantage of that, and that's kind of what we said about Amon-Ra after his rookie season. But for me, I look at Jaden Reed, and I still really like him. I have him wide receiver 38. I just think he might be slightly overpriced on the market right now, and if you could cash out on Jaden Reed for a late first-round rookie pick this year, I would probably do it. If all you can get is a second-rounder, I'm okay holding Jaden Reed, but a late first-round rookie pick is something that I would definitely be willing to sell, whether it's this year, late first round, or next year, mid to late first-round pick for Jaden Reed. Some of these next guys, I'll just speed through: Terry McLaurin, Stephon Diggs, Marquise Brown, and Jamison Williams. All of these guys are mispriced in my opinion. Terry McLaurin, similar to DK Metcalf, only worse, has been a wide receiver 3 his entire career. So we're waiting for this mythological upside from Terry McLaurin for him to be like a wide receiver 1 in fantasy. He's going to be 29 this year, and he's never achieved that upside. So why would I overpay for Terry McLaurin, who's still valued inside the top 40 Dynasty wide receivers for some reason, when I can get Calvin Ridley or Christian Kirk, who have both had multiple finishes higher than Terry McLaurin's career best finish in more pass-friendly offenses as well, for way cheaper than Terry McLaurin? So to me, it just doesn't make any sense. Jaden Daniels, obviously, in theory, an upgrade at the quarterback position for the Commanders, but Sam Howell literally led the NFL in dropbacks. He led the NFL in pass attempts, so I can't imagine that type of volume keeps up with a run-first quarterback like Jaden Daniels. So Even if Jaden Daniels is a better quarterback, a better passer than what Sam Howell was giving this offense last year, I still think that the passing volume will be less than what we saw from the Commanders a year ago. So, and then with Marquise Brown, I think he's just a one-year rental for Kansas City. He could be a solid like wide receiver 3 flex play this year, but I think Xavier Worthy will be the guy for them long term. He's a fine option for flex production, but he is priced as if he'll be a wide receiver 3 all season right now with Marquise Brown. I don't think he will be. I think that Worthy will eventually take over and out-target him and out-produce him. And of course, if Rashee Rice doesn't get suspended or if he only gets suspended for a couple games, I think Marquise is like basically the third or the fourth option in that offense at best throughout the duration of the year. So he's the type of guy that I'd probably be looking to sell on if you can cash in on that name cachet of the Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver. Jameson Williams, like, why is this guy a top 50 dynasty wide receiver? I just have no idea why. He hasn't done anything in his career so far. 6.7 points per game last year as a second-year wide receiver. Please let me know when Jameson Williams is even starting for the Lions. Like, he hasn't even been a starter for his team yet. He's been under a 50% route participation in both of his career seasons so far. If you like Jameson Williams and you're like, okay, year 1 was the ACL tear, I'm willing to write that off. Year 2, he had that gambling suspension. He came back and he started to have some big plays, and I'm excited about Jameson Williams. That's fine, but wide receiver 50 is way too freaking high, man. Especially if you can get a mid-second round pick for this guy, which apparently you can still get according to Keep Trade Cut. I would easily re-roll him into a younger rookie, into a guy who doesn't seem like a head case, a guy that doesn't work hard, because in my opinion, that's what Jameson Williams is based on what we've seen from him so far, the fact that he gambled on Detroit Lions property and all that kind of stuff. He just doesn't seem like the type of guy that's going to ever hit big in fantasy. Might be a decent best ball guy, but that's pretty much it. In terms of my other like slight sells at the wide receiver position, we have Puka Nacua and Chris Olave. Nothing against those guys. I just prefer the guys ahead of them. Like for me, I have Garrett Wilson, Malik Neighbors, and A.J. Brown ranked ahead of Puka Nacua, and right now the market ranks him ahead of those guys. So for me, I would just sell them straight up. Like if I can get Garrett Wilson for Puka, I would 100% do it. Chris Olave, same thing. He ranks higher than Odunze, higher than London, and higher than Ayuk, who I also prefer to Olave. So for those guys, it's just that they're slightly overpriced relative to the wide receiver position. I actually sold Chris Olave this morning for a mid projected with a chance to be early 2025 first next year, as well as a second from the same person. So I could end up with like the 104 and the 204 in next year's class, which I believe was a good price tag to sell Chris Olave for. Number 5 sells here, the final sells of the wide receiver position. We have Michael Pittman Jr. and Jackson Smith-Njigba, who I've talked about ad nauseum, so I'm not going to rehash all the arguments. Basically, Michael Pittman's got added wide receiver competition, Ed. It's expected to be a run-heavy offense, and Anthony Richardson isn't the type of guy that I want multiple passing options from. So for me with Pittman, the fact that he's still ranked as like a top 15 to 20 dynasty wide receiver, I would just much rather have DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle. You can almost get to Rome Odunze with Michael Pittman right now, Nico Collins, Addison, Higgins, Flowers. I just prefer those guys. They're younger, some of them, and a lot of them have more upside than what Michael Pittman had. I think, just to be honest, he got lucky last year. Like, everything broke right for him. Gardner Minshew starting, all of the pass volume that they ended up having. And then same with JSN. I've talked about him ad nauseum as well. I think he can hit as a wide receiver 2 in fantasy. I liked the prospect profile. I still believe in him to some degree, but I do believe him and Metcalf will cannibalize each other. And I also do believe that George Pickens, who's ranked behind him on Keep Trade Cut, is a better projection. I also believe that all of the rookie wide receivers that went really high in the draft, guys like Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas Jr., Ladd McConkey, I would prefer to re-roll JSN into those guys if I can, which you can according to the market. And even some of the competitive guys, Adams, Evans, and Debo, if that's where your team is at, I also don't mind just re-rolling JSN into those guys as well. So moving on to the running back position. I know that was bulky for wide receivers, but obviously they're one of the more important positions in fantasy. The running back position, some of the hard buys that I have here: Jonathan Taylor, Rashad White, Ramondre Stevenson, Chase Brown, Audric Estime, obviously a rookie, same with Ray Davis, J.K. Dobbins, I just can't quit that guy. But mainly the guys I want to focus on here are JT, Rashad White, Stevenson, and Chase Brown. With Jonathan Taylor, I mean, he's just been banged up the last couple of years. He's the engine of this offense. I'll talk about it here in a second with Shane Steichen being the running back kingmaker. He turned Zach Moss, a career cast-off guy that hadn't done anything really to this point in his career, into like a very productive fantasy running back. So imagine what he can do with a healthy Jonathan Taylor, which we haven't really seen in this offense yet. So for me, Jonathan Taylor having his quarterback back, who's obviously a rushing threat himself, I really do think that Jonathan Taylor has as much upside as he's ever had going back to that 2021 monster legendary season. So for me with Jonathan Taylor, I do believe that at RB4, RB5 price tags, he's the best running back to buy if you can't quite get up to the elite running backs in Dynasty if you're in a contending window, because he's going to be viable for 2 to 3 more years as an RB1 projection. And I seriously do think he has like RB1, RB2 upside overall this year in a redraft setting. So Rachaad White, another guy that I'm buying right now. He was the RB4 in fantasy last year in overall finish, RB10 in points per game as a second-year running back. They added a running back in the 4th round with Bucky Irving, and that might impact his target share, but they didn't add any like thumper goal line back, and the Bucs drafted basically the best interior offensive lineman in this class to help the run game out. And this is going to be a solid offense. I don't think anybody expects the Bucs to be terrible. They'll probably be about a league average or better offense, and he will own the goal line opportunities in that backfield. So with Rachaad White, similar to Jonathan Taylor, if you need a contending running back and you can't quite get to the elite guys, go for Jonathan Taylor. If you can't get him, try to go down for Rachaad White. You're getting basically elite guys are like top 3 running back projections. Jonathan Taylor, I think, is a top 6 running back projection. And then with Rachaad White, I think you can project a RB1 ceiling out of him from a redraft setting this year. So Rachaad White, a guy that I'm buying after the NFL draft. Ramondre Stevenson, also a very solid top 15 projection. So again, Taylor's the best guy that you can buy. Rachaad White second best. And if you can't quite get to them, I think Ramondre Stevenson's a great option here because I think he was one of the bigger winners of the entire draft for me. If you're a contender, this is a guy that was basically an RB1 before he got injured last year with a horrible quarterback, a horrible offense, no wide receiver talent around him. He was the whole offense last year, and the Patriots added nobody really other than Antonio Gibson to this backfield, and more importantly, they drafted a franchise quarterback, in my opinion, Drake May, who I really, really believe in. Jacoby Brissett, even if he starts a number of games this year, will be a big-time upgrade over what they had last year. They drafted Jalen Polk and Javon Baker in round 2 and 4 to help out the wide receiver core. They brought in KJ Osborne to help out the wide receiver core. They drafted 2 offensive linemen to help out the offensive line, and they drafted Jaheim Bell in the 7th round at tight end. So to me, this offense just got so much better around Ramondre Stevenson. And if he still has his 65-70% workload like he did last year, this guy has RB1 upside this year in a redraft setting. And he's still young enough that he could hit free agency next year. They could bring him back. You never know. He's available right now for a late 2nd round pick. And it's hard to find top 15 running back production from a guy that isn't like really, really old in the mid to late rounds of Dynasty startups, especially when you consider you could probably send the 211 for this guy in a trade right now. Maybe it costs you the 208, the 207 at absolute most, but I believe you should be able to get him for that type of price tag, and that's definitely worth it if you're a contending team. Chase Brown, the final guy that listed here as a hard buy, I think he flashed quite a bit as a rookie, and I really did love the prospect coming out of Illinois. Behind Joe Mixon, he was just tasked with like a change of pace role, but he had a lot of big plays, and now his competition is Zach Moss. Like, Zach Moss was nothing until he got to Indianapolis. He had a good season last year in Shane Steichen's scheme, but like I said with Jonathan Taylor, we've seen Shane Steichen's scheme elevate Miles Sanders and other running backs before. I believe that Chase Brown has a really good shot here to win out this backfield as the season goes along, and he could be a league winner this year. So for me, late 2nd, early 3rd round pick, if you're a contender and you have 2 solid running backs but no depth, I think Chase Brown is the type of guy I'd be willing to go after. Send away the 211, the 212, the 301, something like that. You might be able to get him in peak rookie season for that type of price tag. Some other running back buys that I like, Isaiah Pacheco is definitely the most significant winner among this group of guys after the NFL draft because he had nobody added to his backfield. He plays for the Kansas City Chiefs, which we all know is a good thing. He won this backfield outright last year as a 2nd-year running back, and nobody got added. It's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It's, Jerick McKinnon maybe still there. I don't even know. Top 7 last year in red zone touches, despite missing 3 games, and the Chiefs not really being that good of an offense. They didn't have pass catchers last year. Travis Kelce was banged up. The Chiefs should be much better on offense this year with Xavier Worthy coming in. hopefully Rashee Rice doesn't get suspended for too long, and also Marquise Brown coming in and Travis Kelce being healthy. They extended him for 2 years. So for me, I look at Isaiah Pacheco, and he could legit be a top 6, top 8 running back in fantasy this year. So I moved him a little bit up in my Dynasty running back rankings. Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott are apparently the new tandem in Dallas. So I guess they're winners of the NFL draft, and they would be guys that I would consider slight buys right now if you're a contending team. They could add to that backfield still. There's still some guys available in free agency, but Dowdle and Zeke, as it stands right now, are 2 guys that if you held them on your roster, you probably feel pretty good about. They probably gained some value after the NFL draft. Ty Chandler, same thing. Sneakily a high upside option because Aaron Jones has been banged up most of his career, especially in recent years. So I feel pretty good about him. Ty Chandler as a good backup running back, and even Dwayne McBride as like a deep, deep sleeper, as a guy that you could stash at the end of a startup. And then Austin Eckler and Tony Pollard fit into like a soft buy for me because both guys are just like really, really down in the market value-wise. We were so disappointed in both of them. They were like back-end first, early second-round redraft picks, and they just didn't produce. Hopefully, in their new situations, maybe they're healthy. I think health definitely was a big factor for both of these guys. Eckler got banged up right away last year. Tony Pollard was coming off of knee surgery, so I think both of them, if they're healthy, could perform RB2 production or better in their new landing spot, so they'd be potentially worth a shot depending on the price. So hard sells at the running back position. Let's look at James Cook here. I disagreed with James Cook being RB11 pre-draft, and he's still RB11 now, which I honestly don't understand because he did dodge, Trey Benson and Jonathan Brooks, some of the higher-end running backs landing in his backfield. But I do believe that 4th-rounder Ray Davis from Kentucky could really impact his workload on the ground. He's a smart, instinctive runner. He knows basically how to play running back. That's the best way I could describe Ray Davis. And he had a lot of experience in college. He should be very pro-ready to contribute early for this team. James Cook can be sold for Josh Jacobs, Rachaad White, Isaiah Pacheco, and the top 2 rookie running backs. That is my problem with James Cook. I have no problem saying, oh, he's a top 16 dynasty running back because that's where I have him ranked. I just don't think he should be a top 12 dynasty running back because I would definitely prefer Josh Jacobs. I would definitely prefer Rachaad White, Isaiah Pacheco, and if you're a young team who wants to re-roll into some younger backs with more upside, I would prefer Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson to James Cook right now. So that would be what I'm selling him for, but if you can't get that on the market, I suppose just hold. Najee Harris, Zach Moss, and Zamir White are all guys that I'm selling right now as well. They have decent opportunity in front of them, don't get me wrong, but I'm pretty sure that neither of these guys are that good of running backs, honestly. I just don't think they're that talented, and they might have better options in their own backfields. I think Jaylen Warren is a better running back than Najee Harris. I think that Chase Brown could be a better running back than Zach Moss. I think that Alexander Mattison and Dylan Laube, who they brought in to the Las Vegas backfield, could eat into Zamir White's workload because he's not some kind of game changer that is going to command elite volume. If nobody's biting on these guys, then they're fine depth for a contender. Like if you can't sell Zamir White for a 2nd-round pick, then don't worry about it. You can just hold him. But all of these guys should be able to fetch you a second in the right market, and maybe you'll have to wait closer to the season to actually get that done. But I do feel like you should be actively shopping them. And then Kendre Miller and Keaton Mitchell, I mean, they're just risky guys. Kendre I've talked about already. He's a top 35 dynasty running back, despite Alvin Kamara still being valued inside the top like 25, 28 running backs. So to me, the math isn't mathing there. I think if you expect Kamara to be good this year, then why am I buying into Kendre Miller? I think both of these guys should be down a little bit in the rankings and a little bit tighter in terms of market value, because I could see Kamara taking over this backfield yet again and being a solid RB2 producer next year, but I could also see Kendre Miller eating more into this backfield. That's going to cannibalize both of them. I think this is one of I think this is not a good offense. I don't think that they're going to be a great team next year, so it's not like I'm really excited to get pieces of this backfield anyway. And then with Keaton Mitchell, he was fun last year for the Ravens, but he's a UDFA coming off a torn ACL for a team that signed Derrick Henry. So why is he valued inside the top 40, 45 dynasty running backs? Like, to me, I would just sell him now and be like, man, it sucks that he tore his ACL. Maybe he'll be worth something later, and you could buy him back at that point. But for me, I'm just not excited about him. And then DeAndre Swift, the final sell of the running back position here. He's the only real soft sell, I think, because there's nothing really against DeAndre Swift. I think he's a fine RB2 to have in Dynasty if you're a contender. But I definitely want pieces of this Bears offense, because I think Caleb Williams is going to come in right away, gangbusters, and look like a great quarterback. I just think very highly of Roschon Johnson and Khalil Herbert, DeAndre Swift's backups, to the point that I think all three of these guys will have value, and all three of these guys could have their weeks. So unless you're in a best ball format, I'm not a huge fan of holding DeAndre Swift as like the clear lead guy in this backfield. I know they paid him. I know they went out and made a conscious effort to pay him in free agency. But to me, I don't see a huge talent discrepancy between Swift, Roschon Johnson, and Khalil Herbert. Roschon and Khalil Herbert looked good last year, and I think all three of these guys could turn this into a running back by committee. So let's get into the quarterback and to the tight end position. Hopefully I don't go too long on this video. The quarterback position, I've already talked about a lot of these guys, so I'll keep this one brief. Some of my hard buys, Trevor Lawrence, Drake May, Will Levis, and then cheaper guys that you could just use as throw-ins to like trades or whatever. Jacoby Brissett, if you need an immediate starter, I think that Drake May will probably take a couple weeks before he wins out that job. And then Ryan Tannehill, actually still available in free agency right now. He's not even been signed to a team yet. So Ryan Tannehill, a guy that's interesting if there's a quarterback injury in training camp or something like that. With Trevor Lawrence, I've been hyping him up all spring. He adds Brian Thomas Jr., Gabe Davis is signed in free agency to go along with ETN, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, left tackle Anton Harrison, or right tackle Anton Harrison that they took in the first round, will be going into year 2. Trevor Lawrence, most importantly, will actually be healthy this year because he was dealing with ankle and shoulder injuries, and it really kind of soured our expectations of Trevor Lawrence because I think all of us, myself included, were expecting last year Trevor Lawrence to come out and look like the next Jalen Hurts in terms of that young quarterback that took a big step forward. And I think because of injury and a lot of moving parts, it just didn't happen. This year, hopefully it does happen, and I do believe it will. So Trevor Lawrence, to me, one of the biggest buys and probably the single biggest buy in all of Dynasty fantasy football because we all want to love Trevor Lawrence. He was highly thought of by the Dynasty community. If he has a top 5 in MVP voting type of season, which I do believe is very much in the range of outcomes for him, he's going to vault himself all the way up to a top 6, top 8 startup pick where he belongs, in my opinion. I have him in the tail end of the first round, but I've seen him go off the board mid-second, late second, early third round of Dynasty startups, and to me, it is just an absolute steal at that point in time. Drake May, of course, he's a rookie, but I'm just higher on him in general. I believe he's in that tier with Trevor Lawrence and Jordan Love and Kyler Murray and those type of guys. So if you're getting him at the 106, 107 in your rookie draft, just thank your lucky stars that your league mates are that stupid, because I think that Drake May is a stud dual threat quarterback who's going to lead that Patriots franchise for years to come. And then Will Levis, a guy that I've been hyping up all offseason as well, who I wasn't high on the prospect, but I liked what I saw in his rookie season. They added pieces around him. Calvin Ridley, the running game with Tony Pollard. Of course, they still have Spears, still have DeAndre Hopkins, still have Treylon Burks, still have Chugga Conquo. There's guys there that Will Levis can throw to. And more importantly, he had the worst offensive line in the league last year. And they drafted J.C. Latham in the first round, which to go along with Peter Skoronski, they bring in Bill Callahan and Brian Callahan, which will improve the offensive line's coaching as well. So Will Levis, a guy that really has a chance to be this year's Jordan Love. That's why I'm high on Will Levis. He could, keep his value or even lose value, and potentially the Titans could be in the quarterback market next year. But I actually think, given how he's set up, given what I saw from him already, and given the coaching and the new protections and new weapons that came in, I feel like he's more likely to be this year's Jordan Love than he is to fall out of favor with the team. So Will Levis, a guy that I think is a really good buy, especially for rebuilding teams. Dynasty quarterback, soft buys here. We have Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, Daniel Jones. All of these guys are kind of just like hated on the market. Nobody likes Brock Purdy because he's like, carried by his offense, but he's still, in my opinion, a top 15 dynasty quarterback, much better version of Tua Tagovailoa. I think that the 49ers have great talent around him, and he's still going to be a back-end QB1, high-end QB2 for redraft this year. Dak Prescott, same thing. He's a little bit older. There's a little bit of contract stuff in the way of him right now, but I still believe he can be a top 10 redraft quarterback for the next couple of years. And then Daniel Jones, a sneaky winner of the NFL draft. The Giants didn't draft a quarterback highly, not even like a Spencer Rattler or anybody like that. And they did get him a number 1 receiver in Malik Neighbors. So I feel quite good about Daniel Jones getting one more year. And by the way, Daniel Jones can run. He's been a solid fantasy quarterback to prove himself to this Giants franchise. Will he do it? I don't think so. I don't think he's a great quarterback, but he's QB 27 for a reason. You're kind of getting that baked into his cost. And if he does, hit and he gets 2 more years as a starter, or maybe even after the Giants, he just goes to a different team, I think that you're getting a pretty solid dual threat quarterback who can contribute QB2 production on the cheap with Daniel Jones there. And then as far as the sells that go for the quarterback position, we have Anthony Richardson, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, and Derek Carr. With Anthony Richardson, I've talked about it. He's a risky asset. He's valued right now as like a borderline first-round startup pick, and that scares me. It reminds me of Justin Fields last year. It reminds me of Trey Lance 2 years ago. There's a world where Anthony Richardson just doesn't look like a good quarterback. And even though if he does, he's going to be great and he's going to be a high-end, fantasy pick next year because of how much he can run, I'm worried about the prospect that I saw at Florida, and I'm worried that he's not going to live up to the big arm and the elite fantasy production the way that we saw from Trey Lance in San Francisco. So again, a little bit concerning, a little bit, it's more of a price thing with Anthony Richardson, really, is all it comes down to. It's not that I don't think I believe in Anthony Richardson. He's valued as if we already have seen it, and we haven't already seen it. We saw a little bit of fantasy production as a runner, but then he got injured, and it's just a guy that I really struggle with sometimes. I think Anthony Richardson should be like a late second round pick, not an early to mid second round pick or a late first round pick. So Jared Goff, I'm always selling on this high-end QB2 production. Jared Goff is the guy on the upswing this year. Daniel Jones and Geno Smith were the guy on the upswing last year. I think with these guys, it's a flat tier, relatively speaking, and Jared Goff is just at the high end of it. So if you could sell Jared Goff and get up to a better quarterback, like a Brock Purdy, like a Dak Prescott, somebody like that, I would try and do that right now with him because he's a volatile projection year to year, in my opinion. Baker Mayfield, same thing, to be honest. I think he's a volatile projection, and you could use him to sell up to a better quarterback. And then Justin Fields, there's still truthers in every single league. Somebody's going to believe in him, and you could maybe sell on him at QB 25 price tags where I have him at QB 31. So let's rattle through the tight ends, and then we'll get out of here. At tight ends, the buys that I have here, the easiest one, this is really, I'm going to spend most of my time on this one. Mark Andrews is valued right now as like tight end 7 or 8 in Dynasty. And to me, that is just absolutely ludicrous. This guy's been a top 5 Dynasty tight end for 5 straight seasons in points per game. So I don't know where we're getting tight end 7 from. And Mark Andrews, he's 28 years old. It's not like he's ancient. He's not 31, 32 years old. This is a guy that can give you 3-4 more top 5 Dynasty tight end seasons, top 5 redraft seasons at the tight end position. And his offense is pretty well set up. I mean, Lamar just won the MVP. You have Zay Flowers there. Mark Andrews, of course, is still the number 1. I can't believe that this guy isn't closer to tight end 2 in value right now than he is at tight end 7 or tight end 8. So if you need a competitive tight end, man, it doesn't get better at buying a tight end right now than Mark Andrews. Tucker Kraft, I've talked about it already. I believe he's the better of the 2 tight ends that the Packers drafted last year. So I will be buying him aggressively and selling correspondingly Luke Musgrave aggressively as well. David Njoku, 2 straight top 8 seasons sneakily. So I believe that he also has a chance to be a solidified top 10 Dynasty tight end, still just 27 years old, going to be 28 when the season starts, and he's entering his prime. Hopefully, Deshaun Watson can figure out his shit. Greg Dulcich, torn hamstring pretty much the entire year, just wiped out his season, and now he has an accurate quarterback like Bo Nix coming in. Sean Payton's offense is starting to come into fold. They've kind of washed out the whole Russell Wilson experience, and they're going younger. They're going with the guys that they like, and Greg Dulcich, to me, is one of those guys. So Greg Dulcich, an interesting option there. Ben Sinnott, I think the market just needs to catch up to him getting drafted as high as he did. And then the guys that I'm selling at this position are Travis Kelce, fresh off of a new contract. He just looked a little bit washed to me, not going to lie. If you can't sell him for top 10 Dynasty tight end prices, which to me would be like an early second rounder or more, then don't bother with it. You're probably better off holding him and using that production. I'm just saying in most leagues, he's a huge name. He's one of the best tight ends in fantasy football history. You might still be able to get a first round pick for the guy. And if you can, then you absolutely should try and do that. Or if you can transition from Kelce up to Andrews, you should absolutely do that, in my opinion. And speaking of Andrews, I don't know why Isaiah Likely is valued as like a tight end 16 in Dynasty, because Andrews ain't going anywhere. So that's the way I feel about Isaiah Likely. He's the best tight end handcuff in fantasy football, but he's not doing anything as long as Mark Andrews is on the field, in my opinion. So like I said, that was a lot. I know I went through a lot of information there, but if you did get some value from this video, go ahead and leave me a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if this is the first time you're checking us out. And of course, all of this information came from our Dynasty trade value chart, post NFL draft update. All of our Dynasty rankings are up to date. All of our one quarterback, our super flex, our prospect rankings are in here in this Dynasty trade value chart. It is probably the single best tool that you guys can use right now, because I know in my rookie drafts, I'm trying to make deals fast and furious. On my contenders, I'm seeing, who's available in trade that I can buy for production. On my rebuilders, I'm trying to trade down in the rookie draft. I'm trying to punt into future draft picks or whatever the case is. And this is one of the best tools that you guys can possibly get. And it is available right now, flockfantasy.com, promo code FSE for 30% off, a 7-day free trial, as well as 6 months for free when you sign up annually. And if you guys are in a bunch of Dynasty rookie drafts right now, or you got one coming up and you want my personalized advice on that rookie draft. You can sign up annually on Flock Fantasy right now using promo code FSE, and you'll get a free voucher to get a team breakdown using our site. You just import your team into our My Teams feature, and you put submit to review, and you submit it for us to review it, and we can submit that. Or you can use your free Zoom consultation that you get as an annual Mother Flocker subscriber using promo code FSE. So a couple different options. If you want our personalized advice, also just leave any comments down below. We'll try and get to as many as we can. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.